My son's really into D&D. Gets sitting at the computer every Saturday night. All their friends log on. They go to some sort of website, Roll20 or something, and they play Dungeons and Dragons at a distance. Other than it being over a internet connection, it's exactly like the Dungeons and Dragons that we used to play when I was little. And of course, Dungeons and Dragons led in many ways to most of the video games that we get really into these days, especially when we talk about, massive multiplayer online games. All this stuff really came from Dungeons and Dragons, which is really a brilliant game. And I've heard lots and lots of people make fun of Dungeons and Dragons. It's a completely fair quip to make fun of people who play Dungeons and Dragons as being nerdy and to look down upon them because they're a bunch of people sitting at their kitchen table pretending like they're elves and dwarfs and doing all sorts of adventures when it's just, regular kids sitting in a robe rolling dice. It seems silly, doesn't it? Pretending like you're off on some adventure while you're sitting at your table. And that's why video games started appealing to me in the 80s. Instead of Dungeons & Dragons, because it felt less pretend. It's there. You're touching it. You're making things happen on the screen. And for me, there's this video game called Might and Magic 2 that was basically a Dungeons & Dragons ripoff where you play by yourself, but you make a party of characters and go off and have this adventure. And it was a massive game for its time with these really wimpy graphics, which made it more fun because you got to imagine everything, right? And it was immersive. Absolutely immersive. I used to dream about it. Like, swear to God, I had really vivid dreams about places and people from this more or less text-driven game with a little tiny box of graphics that didn't do very much for the gameplay. And I started feeling stupid about that too, right? Because now I'm really into something. Nobody else is into it. Nobody else had played this game. It wasn't a shared experience. It was just pretend. It's just on a computer. And all these different iterations come around. Some are better than others. Maybe you're into something that I'm not into. I feel like video games sort of peaked with Ocarina of Time in 1998, but that's just me. It was a tremendous, amazing sort of game. But again, it's a game, right? Pretend, right? How is that any sillier than football? Right? Football, I know people who get really wrapped up in football, who wrap up their identities into these football players, most of whom these days are much younger men than they are, and they suit up in their special colors with their numbers, and they go out and they do fake wrestling where they're fighting and trying to push a ball from one side of the place to the other, and sometimes you can throw it up in the air, and sometimes you get to kick it, and the kicking it does other things, and you get a certain amount of points if you're kicking, or if you're running, or if you're throwing, and if the other team gets the ball, like under certain conditions, then they get to have the ball, and they get to go the other way, and they make points happen, yay! Or else, for whatever reason, they got the ball, but wait, nope, this thing happened first where there was a bounce and this was pushed over here, and this line shows you, upon further review, that now that's not your ball, that this is their ball still. That's what I see when I see a football game. I used to play football in high school. I felt like I really had to. I was a big guy, and people were telling me you got to play football, and lo and behold, I was good at it, right? But I could never get into it. Now, I couldn't get into it like Dungeons and Dragons. I couldn't get into it because my coaches wanted to see me angry all the time. I want to see you get mad, Smith, over and over again. Wanting to fire me up, see me get angry. Want to see that look in my eye. You want to tear this guy apart. And I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. But we're running an ISO, so I just have to push this guy over there, and I'm fine. And I just do my job. It's just like I couldn't get wrapped up in it. And people are pushing you and hitting you and getting mad and roaring or whatever they do. And I was just doing my thing. And it's tiring and whatnot. And, we scored a points. Yay. And, they kicked it. And we caught it and did things. Yay. It just never really clicked to me. And I would have been happier sitting around the kitchen table, wearing a little robe, playing D&D. I would have been more into it. And these two things aren't different. You're pretending like you're on an adventure, in D&D, and you're pretending, and that's silly. In football, you're pretending like points are a thing. You're pretending like rules are a thing. You're pretending like these special conditions are somehow reflective of the real world or reflective of some inherent skill and ability. The fact that, you have so many yards until the next down, the fact that this is out of bounds so the clock stops, versus this one not being out of bounds so the clock doesn't stop, so you have to call a timeout. They act like these rules aren't completely arbitrary. Like they can't be bent and pushed around and whatnot. So what I'm saying is that the game of football, the game that everybody gets so into about, this call and this guy's running back averages and that guy's catching and this one's prowess, what they get wrapped up in is the story of it. It's not the actual game. What you're actually looking at, is a lot of people out there in their special suits pushing each other around and grabbing a ball and doing stuff. And that's what's really happening. And that happens all day long. And if you didn't have the benefit of understanding the rules at all, or of seeing the scoreboard at all, you would just see a bunch of people play fighting and stopping and play fighting and stopping over and over again. And that is the objective reality of what's going on down there. The subjective reality becomes this huge, deep narrative of rivalries and scores and records. And people remember different people who play different positions with their different statistics. And this gets gone into over and over again with the announcers. And they draw little X's and arrows and swoops on the screen that show different plans. And all of that is a story that's just as pretend as me being an elf. It's just as pretend as rolling dice. In fact, rolling dice, at least, is a little more honest than the arbitrary rules that go on in football. And, baseball, of course, is just as silly. Just as silly to have somebody sitting there and judging whether or not you should have been able to hit this ball and that ball you couldn't have been expected to hit properly. And, you catch it in the air, you're out, because out's a thing, You're just seeing a bunch of stuff happen, a bunch of people performing little tiny stunts at a small scale for little bits at a time. But the story wraps you up in it. You ever watch the Olympics? The Olympics are all over this. The Olympics, you're watching sports you don't normally watch. You're watching the gymnastics and ribbon twirling and the triple jump and shot put and all this stuff that you don't normally watch. Water polo. And this is just Summer Olympics. We could throw into the figure skating and the ski stuff and bobsledding. And since you have no frame of reference for this stuff, you don't memorize the statistics and you don't know the characters and you don't really know the rivalries beyond these bigger, globally country-ish things. You have these announcers who meticulously give you backgrounds about how this girl broke her ankle 2 years ago and she didn't get to go to championships, and now because of the loving, tender care and tough love of this amazing coach is finally stepping into the world stage and is expected to do 3 twirls in the air before landing with her hands up over her head. And it's not that what they're doing isn't admirable. It's that the announcer and the people who put on the show, that their job is to tell you what to admire, to tell you what to look for, to tell you to prep your expectations, because what's going on here is not someone just doing flips and twirls and making pretty shapes. We're doing gymnastics, is that they want you to be wrapped up in the story. They want you to feel the drama, because this is what gets to people. What the hell am I talking about, right? Well, let's talk about it. Banks. Banks do the same thing. Money does the same thing. Physically, what you see happening has nothing to do with the story behind it. The changing of money, the owing of money, the interest rates, the buying of a house, what's your down payment, what's your skin in the game, what kind of insurance you have, all this stuff is story. It's a story that binds us, legally speaking, a story that binds us to performing some sort of expected dancing for each other. But it is not reflective of the actual reality of what we go through. Bankers pretend you own a house. You pretend you're buying a house from a banker, but you're actually just living there, the same as if you're renting, with money, which doesn't really mean anything beyond the pretendness, just like rolling a 20-sided die or having an out-of-bounds place kicker. It's all a story that's grafted on to a subjective reality into the objective reality. You get a mongoose and have it come watch you buy a house, and it doesn't know what the hell you're playing at. It doesn't see some sort of domineering, powerful thing that's going to make wealth for you and your family for years to come and give you a place to grow old with your wife and all this other stuff that the story of buying a house does for us. The mongoose sees a bunch of people sitting at a desk wasting time. The mongoose sees a bunch of football players in their special suits running around doing God knows what. It makes no sense to it. Because the story does not take place in the objective reality. The story takes place in the players' heads, in the watchers' heads, in the participants' heads, in the bankers' heads. If we all just stopped pretending about money today, it would go away. If we all just stopped pretending about, countries and houses and nationalism, these things would go away. But collectively, we keep the story going. The story is what's powerful. The story makes the world go round. The story of credit is something that has built the world around us physically from a story. From pretending like you have 10 times as much money to lend out as you do, and collecting that pretend money from 10 times as many people, you're able to accomplish all of this stuff. Plus there's interest, which is pretend. With companies that are pretend. It's the same thing as somebody pretending to be educated by picking up their college degree. Pretending like they have attained what is ultimately an education, but objectively is a piece of paper with prettyish words written on them. And going deeper is a detailed record of a transcript that reflects how well you did this class and that subject, and it takes everything you do in a class and it boils it down to a single letter. A. You got an A. And that means so much, and we're so proud. It's just a story. And education is not a story. An education is a life experience. An education is an understanding and a broadening of your perspective. An education is a ripening of who you are. It's becoming more of a part of the world around you. The schooling, though, that's a story. The schooling is what you pay for. It's what you go through. It's jumping through the hoops. It's the narrative. And I'm a teacher, so I'm part of the one who gives you, like that announcer at the Olympics, the deep background of what it is that you're doing here today. Lets you understand what to look out for, what to accomplish, how to do it. And ooh, check this out. Turns out that just as many people were able to get an A as I thought there would be. And just as many people were able to pass as I thought there would be. Why is it that I don't get a bum class once in a while where everybody gets a D? I mean, there are probably teachers who do get that. But on average, they're about the same grade spread for every class. Well, that's because that's how hard it is. Okay, so everyone has the same skill set coming in. There's all sorts of arbitrary stuff in it that it's too detailed to get into. My point is that going through college is every bit as silly and made up as football, which is every bit as silly and made up as D&D. You realize that objective reality is really hard to nail down, right? We've talked a little bit about this, about how there's a camel in the room and you look at it with two eyes, but you just see the one camel because your brain is lying to you about what's going on because your two eyes should be giving you two pictures. It goes deeper than that because there's this huge structure that your vision has to go through to be made into an image in your head, which is the description of the physical world around you. And that takes time. That takes about 1/5 of a second, 20% of a second for this picture to coagulate and materialize. And since 1/5 of a second can be really troublesome amount of time when things get tough, you don't see the world as it is right now. You see a hallucination of what your brain expects you're going to see 1/5 of a second from now. It's telling you the story, it's taking in your vision, it's constructing visions from your eyes, and it's projecting to you in your brain an idea of what it thinks you're going to see 1/5 of a second from now. If you haven't heard that before, it's because it's just information that's really hard to deal with. How do you make something like this practical? Why does that matter? Because this is going on with all your senses all the time. The quickest link you have is with your nose. Smelling doesn't go through the hypothalamus for whatever reason, while all your other senses do, and it's instead is embedded really close to your hippocampus, which is why we think that it has something to do with your memory. That smell seems to evoke memory more than other things. But everything else going through your hippocampus takes time to unravel, and it's all an illusion. You actually hear things before you see them. And that's why in a car you would honk rather than flash your lights at someone, because the honking is quicker to react than the seeing. Nobody predicts that they're going to see lights flash at them 1/5 of a second beforehand. Despite the fact that sound goes slower than light, so at a distance, of course, light has its advantage. But close up into your head, where things are nearly instantaneous, sounds a little quicker to be processed by you than light is. So everything has to be constructed so it makes sense. Kind of like editing a movie. You have to put the sound in on top of the film so that it all makes some kind of sense. And you have these people with their mouths moving, and the speakers are to the side of you, yet you somehow perceive that the sound is coming out of these mouths because your brain's putting it all together. It just patchwork quilts it into one beautiful picture. This is a really disruptive thought, right? My point with much of these lectures is disruptive thinking. If you are to plow your way into being a more effective individual, you have to be more unique in that individuality. In disrupting your thinking away from your habits, away from your normal, away from the predictable, is one useful way to do that. To get you thinking laterally, we have to shake those normal pathways of your thoughts. We have to shake what is normally going on, your normal expectations of yourself, your normal expectations of the world around you, and start getting you to approach problems, places, and things with a different eye. As I said in the 5th lecture, we want to build a higher sense of reason. And building that higher sense of reason means disrupting your thoughts as much as possible. Now, Zen teachers know this. The Zen koan, like, what's the sound of one hand clapping? Or if a tree falls in the forest, is anybody there to hear it? Is meant to rattle the way you normally think. It's meant to get you to question your normal assumptions. Your normal assumptions and your normal thinking is what gets you into the messes that you generally want to find yourself to get out of. Being stressed out, being overwhelmed, being anxious. Your normal ways of thinking corners you into this because that's the nature of the brain trying to worm its way around and trying not to think and trying not to problem solve, trying to have everything be easy and predictable. Our bodies are made for exertion. Our bodies are made for long distance running, for example, of running down animals that we're hunting. It's how we evolved. And the times we're not doing that, we really want to relax. And our brains are part of that. And we know that these days, our brains have to keep doing work. And we have to stretch and grow and strengthen them through working on them over and over and over again if we want to progress in the stuff that you and I care about. So you want to be able to shake up your thinking. Now, let me give you an example. And I don't want to sit here and discount anybody's mysticism at all. I don't want to take an official position on something like psychic powers or global consciousness or witchcraft or anything like that. I don't find any of that as silly as anything else, to be honest with you. I find it just as silly as anything else, I guess, but no less so. I don't, or no more so. I don't find any of that more silly than, say, a football game or a banking system or something like that. I think there are some general assumptions of science that we could stand to shake up, but that's not our job here today. Maybe next season, right? What I do want to say is there's something really effective about something like tarot cards. You do a 13-card Celtic cross spread with tarot cards, and you get this broad spread of ideas that challenges and disrupts your thinking about a situation and about 13 different aspects of that situation. Every time you shuffle a deck of cards, regular playing cards or tarot cards or whatever, every time you shuffle a deck, you get an order of cards that has never existed before. You get a brand new, never before existed order of cards. And I know what you're thinking. Well, there's a chance, right? The chance is so minimal. You are so much more likely to win the lottery than you are to shuffle a deck of cards in a way that's going to give you the same pattern as has existed before in any set of cards anywhere without trying to do it. That's how crazy cards are. And tarot cards have more cards than your normal deck. Why can't I think of how many? Because I haven't done tarot cards for a while? I don't know. But tarot cards, when you do a spread and it gives you 13 different aspects of the situation that you are facing with a different random card, let's say, taking the woo-woo out of it, a different random card in each position. This is 13 chances to shake your normal perception about reality. 13 chances to change the way you see the situation you're looking at. You're wondering about your job, you're wondering about your school, you're wondering about a relationship, you do a tarot card spread, you get some insight, random or not, that is going to force you to think. It's going to force you to address what you're looking at and what you're doing in ways you have never done so before, that are never the same twice. So this is a way of sort of like troubling your brain's need for pattern making. You create a pattern that is essentially not replicable, and you apply it to a situation that you have never faced before, and now you cannot make a normal, predictable, boring pattern out of it. That's really neat. So next time somebody says something about tarot cards, don't roll your eyes. This is a good idea. The I Ching is the same thing. I Ching is this, it goes back much further than tarot cards and provides you the same sort of chance to disrupt your normal thinking. And people who practice the I Ching will tell you that no, what the I Ching does is gets at the heart of the nature of the situation, that it falls, that your sticks or your coins fall in accordance with the Tao and with what should be happening right now, and shows you a pathway, a riverbed of decisions to try. Fine. We can take that too. I'm not against it. I'm not any more against the woo-woo-ness of all of that than I am against anything else that we talk about. I'm fine with it. So you can write that off or not, but don't write off the power of approaching your thinking in a different way. Because everything is a story, and our brains conform to someone else's story so quickly and so easily that you don't even have to think about it. You don't even have to try. People cannot control your objective reality, but people can control your subjective reality, and they do it all the time. Read a book. Read 1984. Watch a presidential speech. Subjective reality is highly controllable. People want it to be controlled. People want to be forgiven of control. They don't want to have to think. They don't want to have to labor over every single point. So what do? They believe in someone. They believe in a leader. Believe in a politician. Believe in a shyster. Believe in a religious leader. Believe in a college. They want to believe in something that will remove from them the burden of their own thoughts, the burden of processing their own reality. That may seem extremely cynical, but it shouldn't. It shouldn't seem super cynical, because it's just a story. It's just one way of looking at it. And you can learn. Like I said before, you can learn through anything. You can learn through any situation. You should learn through any situation. You are made to learn through situations. You are made to learn how to do amazing things like speak and walk and create art. Nobody knows why the human brain has evolved so far as to make the humanities. Nobody knows this. Nobody understands why it is that we not only evolved the ability to survive, but the ability to enjoy a play, the ability to make a beautiful painting, the ability to create a symphony, an opera. Nobody knows why. But we have. And you can learn from anything. It is the one thing that you are good at, the one thing that you can do without anyone's help. It is the one thing that is absolutely powerful of you. But in order to really do this and really access it, you have to grant yourself the authority. You have to realize it's your turn now. It's your turn now to decide what's real. It's your turn now. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to listen to anyone that doesn't make any sense. You don't have to listen to a religious leader or a political leader or anyone else, a teacher, a parent, whoever it is. If you really want to learn, you can step away from their guidance, if that makes sense. Otherwise, listen to the guides that do make sense. Makes sense. That's subjective, right? You get this idea that like maybe nothing is real. Maybe I shouldn't trust anything. Maybe I can say this teacher is completely invalid. Well, there are systems to try and keep some of this stuff in place in nice colleges and universities that are made for really enhancing academic freedom and enhancing the fact that the people who know get promoted and get job security and learn and teach well. Peer-reviewed articles and that kind of stuff make things much more solid. And I don't want to take away from any of that really practical stuff. That's great. It's nice to have some signposts. It's nice to have if you're going to be searching through some new undiscovered territory and you come to the head of the previous explorer on a pike, well, you're heading in the right direction, aren't you? This is where the previous guy was when he ran into trouble, so you must be going in the right way. You just got to be more careful than he was. And maybe don't destroy some other culture, okay? So a college, a university, a school, if they're done right, they are full of heads on pikes. You are following those signs. You are following those pointers that say this way, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're listening to me and you believe that, good, we're in a good place. If you're branching off and saying, nope, this YouTuber said the earth is flat, said that the moon circles around things like this, I don't know what to tell you. Try again next time? I don't know. There are no heads on a pike that direction. You can't find them. There are no spectacular failures heading in the right direction that way. No, there's just self-assuredness. There's just trusting their own patterns. And you can't do that either. So a smart student knows this. A smart student knows that they have to navigate the system along with their own learning. They know that this is a game, but it's a very important game. They know that sometimes, to the best of your judgment, you do have to leave some of this game behind in order to do what is right, to expand your learning, to expand your thinking, and to improve your abilities. But they also know when someone is trying to help them and when someone can be of help to them. They remember that anything can be their guru. Anything can be their teacher. Even a terrible teacher can be learned from. Even a difficult class that you don't get a good grade in can make a lasting and beautiful impact. Because you manage where you are, and you manage where your feet go, and you manage the signs that you're looking for, that you're heading in the right direction. It's not always easy. It does not always feel like it's worth it. But in the end, you build a higher sense of reason that is able to seed that left side of your brain narrator, is able to seed that guy with the ability to articulate what is common knowledge and to articulate what is new ideas. That is able to articulate a new ability through that left brain interpreter. Because the right brain is this landscape knowing. It's this knowing in every direction, all around you. It's a blissful, compassionate understanding of the world. And that is what you're building up. And that's the side of your head that ultimately I'm trying to talk to. I'm talking through the other side. I'm talking through the narrator. I'm talking in such a way that hopefully there's a sort of piece-by-piece puzzle logic that locks into place, that makes enough sense to keep your attention. But ideally, I'm also dancing on that other side of your head and painting a new picture and building something there that is a new sense of trust in the structures that you perceive over there and the feelings and knowings that you have over there, so that you are able to raise your consciousness, to raise your thinking. Well, we're not talking about self-improvement here. You're trying to self-improve. Who's the self who's doing the improving, right? How are you, who needs improvement, the one qualified to improve the self that needs improvement? That's not really what I mean. What I mean here is the ability to trust in what you know and let what you know be the improving force that better advises that left brain, that stops categorizing, that stops writing things off, that stops those instant assumptions, that stops that sort of like poisonous thinking and invites instead a new, higher reason. Now listen, I could be wrong about all of this. I could be wrong about every one of these 14 lectures. Or I could have made the whole thing up. I might like to listen to myself talk, which I do, for 14 lectures. And even if I'm wrong, even if I'm way off, I've done some good here, because what I've done is disrupt your normal thinking and disrupt your thought patterns. And that's what I mean, that you can even learn from a terrible teacher. You can even learn from difficult and sad and depressing situations. Because if you use it as advice, and you use it as a way to process what you're going through and what you know and what is on that landscape side of your head, it doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be, because all progress takes you forward. And progress is not just in a straight line. And you will learn that you will fuck up. That if you fuck up gently and you keep going, that's better than standing still and working and working and working in one place. Alan Watts says, the meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet everybody rushes around in a great panic, as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. And I love that quote, because we're always wondering what it all means. We're always wondering what we're going to build that's going to outlast us. I knew this kid in the 6th grade. They were redoing the cement in the sidewalk at school, and we were told not to touch it. And he went out there, Stephen, and he wrote his name with a stick, Stephen, in that cement, right on Friday afternoon, right before everybody went home. To this day, Stephen is still carved into the sidewalk at the school. He was celebrated that day. He carved his name in a sidewalk that's sitting at the school. Who cares? It will outlast him. Who cares? We don't really care now. Leaving your mark on something in the world is like leaving your mark in the prison yard. To a very small audience, they might really care. But you, now that you've built up a better understanding, know it was all just about being alive in the first place. It was all just about doing the things that make you a better version of you, not by self-improvement, but by growth, by raising, by disrupting your normal trains of thought. So that's going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for listening.